Okay.
Cool.
What's your number two?
Yeah, so my number two film is a documentary film from 1982. I guess you could call it documentary. It's Koyaanisqatsi. So this is it's going to be kind of hard to describe what this film is, but let me just use the IMDb description, even though it's still pretty vague.
Yeah.
It's a collection of expertly photographed phenomena with no conventional plot. The footage focuses on nature, humanity, and the relationship between them. So this film might be a little bit hard to talk about and describe to people that aren't aware of it, and I'm sure most of our listeners probably have not heard of this film. It's more of a cult film, I think. So I first came across this in college on DVD, and essentially this movie is a like a hour and a half long, just series of images with a score behind it. And
Hmm?
there's not a lot of specificity in terms of what the viewer's really trying to get out of it. Like there is a point to the film, and I think it goes back to the Koyaanisqatsi, which is the name of the film, is a Hopi Indian word for like life out of balance. So I think there are some themes here that the director is trying to put across, but what this movie and why I talk about this movie and why it really resonates with me is the first time I saw this movie, it was a very meditative experience. So you sort of fall into this lull, and Philip Glass's score is amazing, very minimalist score. And you're sort of fall into this lull after just watching all these images of nature and humans and cities, and where your mind starts wandering to these like bigger questions, and the things that are happening on the screen sort of help expand your mind a little bit. Like I have actually never meditated before, or at least yet, I should say I haven't meditated yet, but this is what it kind of put me in that experience of this like Zen like experience where now I'm starting to like zoom sort of way out about my own life and the planet, and start thinking about these like larger questions. So some of the things that really resonated with me, and then talk about some of my favorite sequences. Again, this movie is a little bit hard to discuss because it is so, I think, very subjective. Which also is actually what life, I think, is really. It's like you bring your own experiences to your life, and that's how you live it. And I think this movie too is almost like a Rorschach test. So, like for me, it's all these. You feel, or at least I felt when I saw this film, like your life is so small compared to the vastness of the universe, but also you're just one person in a species. So it really helps you understand like your place in the entire universe. Like you're not the center of anything. You're just a part of a giant system. So that helps give you some separation from your life. But life is just also not about you either. There's a society, we're all together. There's one humanity, there's one species, and we kind of go through life like that. Also, there's a lot of incredible sequences around systems, essentially. And especially there's this one sequence of like a lot of sped up hot dogs going down an assembly line. And then it intercuts with sped up humans going up escalators, sort of saying, okay, well, we're all part of these systems. So these systems are kind of larger than us that we necessarily can't control. Some of these systems are man-made, some of them are natural systems, but that we have to start recognizing these things to understand our place in all of it. There's also some great sequences in the film too, where he's sort of doing close-ups of people, just like random people, whether they're waitresses or just people on the streets, or there's a airplane pilot. And it just sort of sits there on these people's faces. And for me, at least, because this comes like later on in the film, I've already kind of in this meditative state. And immediately you're not bringing judgment, or at least for me, I'm not bringing judgment into who these, I want to know about them. It's like, oh, who is this person? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And you're not thinking, oh, here's a waitress. She's, I bring my like expectations of what this person would be and what their life is. I'm immediately like curious, and I want to know why. And I think that's really showing just the power of empathy, and then how that really you shouldn't be judging anyone when you're looking at them with anything that you've experienced. You should instead be very non-judgmental and really just wanting to learn about these other people. And those are the scenes that really resonated with me the most when I saw the film. And it was definitely like a spiritual experience, honestly, when I first saw it back in college. It really kind of blew me away. And again, maybe it was just I was at the right time of, an impressionable, 20-year-old who all of a sudden now is forced to, in the hour and a half this movie is, to think about these sort of like larger questions, like what does it all mean? What is my place in all this? And I think just the rhythm of this film, at least for me, put me in this mindset of all of a sudden thinking about all these different things. And because I too, like I said earlier, the film, I don't think has a very clear agenda about what the director's trying to get across. So like any movie really is about what you bring to it with your own life. So there's a little bit of self-reflection that I do whenever I see this film too. But it's definitely hard to describe the experience without seeing it. And I also feel like this is a movie where if you're not in the right state of mind, you get bored after 5 minutes, or your mind starts wandering to sending text messages or checking email or browsing Twitter, and you're sort of losing what this movie's trying to do, which is kind of put you in this meditative state. Just sit back, listen to the amazing Philip Glass score, and see these incredible images and start thinking about all these grand questions.
Yeah. No, I had not even heard of this movie until you told me about it. And I really loved watching it, but I would be lying if I said that I was totally focused. I wasn't. It was hard to kind of, give it my all. And I do intend going back and watching it a second time, just so I can, now that I know what it is,
right,
be more prepared for it. But yeah, it's incredible though. Like these images and the score, it does something to you for sure. Especially in our lives today where we're so distracted. It was even for the 45 minutes where I wasn't distracted, which is a hard thing to achieve these days. It was,
true.
It was pretty amazing that this movie was able to do that. And then, I mean, it sort of has like a meta quality, like you're saying. It makes you think about the questions that you care about, whatever those questions might be, because of what it's doing. But it's also kind of projecting its own questions and thoughts as well, of nature, the purity of nature, the imbalance of life that humans have created, but then also the beauty of humanity.
Exactly.
Yeah. And these systems that you were talking about, which are challenging and we are at odds with them, but they also in a way support just how life moves. And without them, we wouldn't be able to exist, even though we're at odds with them and are probably ruining stuff because of these systems as well. So there's like a very Russian doll quality, and you can keep going down the rabbit hole more and more if you so chose to. But if you don't, at the surface level, you can also just enjoy it for its artistry and just let it sit with you. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was very curious to hear what themes you would gravitate towards, and I actually really aligned with the themes that you gravitated towards, which is the beauty of humanity in all its mess.
Right.
And I love those shots of people. And I was thinking about this with my number 3 pick, Arrival, of the same thing of empathy, right? If you really take a moment to pause and look at a person and try and understand where they've come from, where they're going, who they are, they're just humans,
Right.
And it's a very powerful thing to just connect with another being. And it's so rare now, especially with the way we interact with people. And I don't know, it's sort of, the movie left me feeling a little bit sad. Of course, there's the climate stuff and nature stuff and all, of course. But to me, that the thing that hit me the most was that would it ever be easy enough for us to engage with other people in a real human way, given how far we've come in our digital ways of interacting with people? And I sound like an old fart even saying that. And there's obviously, great beauty and access and such that comes with us being able to digitally communicate with each other. I mean, let alone us doing this podcast today.
Sure. Yeah.
Living in different parts of the country. So there's a lot of good stuff to it. But at the same time, connecting with one another in a real human way, it just seems harder and harder because our lives are so distracted. So I don't know, it sort of left me with that question mark.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's almost like maybe what I was talking about earlier too, of because this film forces you to like escape your own objective view, because it just kind of lull you in. It's just images and music and that's it. There's no narrative to follow, that you then can approach people in a way where you're curious at the outset. And I do think a lot of this, the technical ways we communicate nowadays. It's almost like commodifying communication, where it's quick and easy and you don't really have to think about it too much, or you can do it while doing other things. And it's very transactional. Exactly. And I think this movie at least puts you into a state where like you start to try to learn and not really communicate, because you can't communicate with the movie. It's just what you're experiencing. But it really tells you got to take a step back, slow down, like, and actually really talk to someone, really try to understand them. That's something too that I definitely feel when I watch this film. I mean, in many ways too, it also to me feels like a movie where if an alien came down and made like a documentary about Earth to take back and be like, hey, look at what this planet's like and the people are like, this movie feels almost like that to me, like directed by such an alien. Like everything in the movie feels very like you're looking at something that you're not a part of, which is really cool, because I feel that as a viewer too. Like I'm detaching now from being a member of the human species, but then looking back and be like, oh wow, look at all the beauty we've done, but also the negative sides of it. And it's very it's like a lot of big questions to me get asked. But I do think you're right. It is a lot of looking at the movie now, 20 years after it came out, and how far the technology has evolved, especially around communication. It just does beg the question. But and the great thing about this movie too was made before all this stuff. Yeah. And it's making you question things now about technologies that didn't even exist 20 years ago. And I think that's just the power of this film, because it just opens your mind up so much to all these different questions that even if the film's not directly addressing anything about the internet, I mean, or social media and all this stuff, but it still is talking about that in a way because it's what you bring to it. So I'm glad you saw it. I think it's a interesting film and hard to talk about without, actually having seen it first. So hopefully with the listeners, we've gotten enough, intrigued them enough. Well, they'll go out and try to check this out, but it's definitely, I call this an experience, and one that I'll never forget, seeing this for the first time when I was 20 and just being like, oh my God, like, what is life?
Well, guess what? We're still talking about that same question 20 years in.
I know.
We'll keep doing that, which I guess is the point.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.